So, for example, in 1910, five Ottoman students were selected as recipients of scholarships from the Ottoman government in order to study at Columbia. So, in 1911, for example, they formed a new club, which was called the Ottoman Club. It was a student club of Columbia, and it was very interesting. And this is from the Columbia University archives of that magazine, Columbian Spectator. And it was composed of different ethnic groups from the Ottoman Empire, like Greeks, for example, you can maybe read it. Four Turks, two Greeks, three Syrians, one Jew, and five Armenians. So it was maybe, this period, the Ottoman government started this idea of Ottomanism in order to stop the crumbling of the Ottoman Empire and unite all the Ottoman ethnic groups under one umbrella, but it didn't work out, unfortunately. So these figures I will show you. Can I just... Now another window was opened.
1911 Abdülhamit dönemi değil mi?
Yok, Abdülhamit dönemi değil. Yeni Young Turk Government dönemi. 1908'deki işte bu Young Turk şeyle. Ha. Okay.
Niye bir şeye
gitmedi? O zaman presentation'ın sağ tarafına bir tıklar mısınız?
Anlamadım, pardon. Neye basayım?
Yok, mouse'a bakıp basın. Tıklayın sağ tarafta. Ya, ileriye doğru.
Nerede? Okay, tamam. Şimdi oldu.
Okay.
So this is a very special picture, which was taken.
Geri bakınız.
Geri gittim, aynen. Which was taken in New York. By the time the Ottoman government of the Young Turk, actually the Young Turk government appointed an imam to New York because they thought that there were enough Muslim citizens and Muslim population in the United States, so it will be better for them to unite and to send an imam to there in order to oversee their prayers, their services, etc. So this was Mehmet Efendi, the Imam Mehmet Efendi of New York. Actually, this was one of maybe the earliest mosques which was opened, which was established in the United States because of the Ottoman government's efforts. And these people with the feathers, they were the students at Columbia University. So I found this picture at the Yalman Papers, Ahmet Emin Yalman Papers at Stanford University, and which was captioned as Columbia Days with New York Imam. So these figures that you see in here, actually, they will be influential figures when the new Turkish Republic was established. So it was an interesting transition. So actually, also that's why I think that Atatürk got some ideas from these students because they knew the American language and then how to speak to them. So, for example, Ahmet Emin Yalman's father was also the teacher of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk in Selanika. So they had this connection also. One of those guys at the picture was Cevat Eyüp, and he was the first, actually, he became the first petroleum engineer in Turkey. So actually, Atatürk invited him in order to establish the petroleum agency and then to extract petroleum. For example, Raman petroleum was extracted thanks to him. But he was not just a student. Actually, because of the war, he couldn't return to Turkey. And in 1914, actually, he graduated from Columbia University, but he couldn't return to Turkey. So he decided to remain in there and work in there. And then he decided publishing news articles about the condition of Turkey and then how the American people should sympathize with the Turkish cause. So it was kind of like public diplomacy for the new Turkish government in Ankara after, of course, the Turkish War of Independence started. Actually, what was unique about the American media for the Turkish cause was that, for example, the European governments, also the newspapers, did not publish anything coming from the Turkish government. So they were kind of like voiceless during the Turkish War of Independence. I will show you later on about an article which was written by a prominent Turk who lived in the United States for a long time. And he said that even the Turkish government employed a person, Cevat İleri, and that they sent him to Europe in order to investigate why they were not publishing anything coming from the Turkish government. And actually, the answer was the editors of the prominent newspapers in Europe. The answer was that they had enough, from the from Turkey, so they didn't want to publish anything from coming from the Turkish government. And they said our readers had enough of the massacres, so we don't want to publish anything about the massacre of Turks. So this was an interesting article. Actually, it appeared in New York Times, and it was like they posed Mustafa Kemal Atatürk as waging a holy war against the European powers. And it was saying that were the Mohammedan peoples to win their independence, the most powerful European nations will be seriously shaken. So they thought that actually Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was like inspiring other nations, other Muslim nations who were occupied by the European powers to raise against this occupation. So that's why they portrayed him like this. There were also a few like public diplomacy agencies in the United States during the Turkish War of Independence. For example, I have found just one document about this organization, Turkish American Information Bureau, which translates Türk-Amerikan İstihbarat Dairesi, among the Red Cross and Turkish Red Cross archives. And this was a letter sent to the Turkish government to make a movie about the like beautiful places of Istanbul, beautiful ladies of Istanbul, and the Turkish cause, the Turkish War of Independence was doing good. So it was kind of like giving morale to the people, to Turkish people in the United States who were there as immigrants, and also there were also these Ottoman students and prominent figures, Turkish prominent figures living in the United States at that time. So it was also interesting because I think even it was a war, the Turkish government and some agencies knew how to do public policy, public diplomacy. So they knew that they needed some support from the United States and the American people. Actually, one of the obstructions for the Ankara government during the Turkish War of Independence was the existence of the American missionaries, who came here. Maybe you are familiar with the history of the American missions in here. For example, one of the most prominent missions was the nearest mission in Harput. Also in Kayseri, there was an American mission, and also in Istanbul, etc. So they also established colleges, hospitals, etc. But they were mostly, trying to convert the Armenians, not the Turks, actually. But during the War of Independence, the reports to the American newspapers actually created an anti-Turkish propaganda in the United States. So actually, the Turkish Angora government, the nationalist government, wanted to, correct any disinformation about the Turks and to stop anti-Turkish propaganda and to urge the American government take the side of Türkiye. So that's why for example, this news was from Anadolu Agency, which was established as the mouthpiece of the Turkish cause during the Turkish War of Independence. And then they were saying that we like Americans, but these missionaries actually are doing anti-Turkish propaganda, so we want to stop it. Don't believe them. For example, after the establishment of the Turkish government, Atatürk actually sent away many of the missionaries to the United States, but he gave special permission to, for example, forced surgeons. But also, because they were like invincible for the new Turkish Republic, because they will educate doctors, medical doctors, and then they will take care of the Turkish people. Also, the medicine was not very well developed at that time. So these Americans were very much educated, actually. So Atatürk gave them special permission. So one of them was Lawrence Shepard. Maybe you have heard this name. He remained in Istanbul, and then he was the first chief physician of American hospital in Istanbul, and then he remained there for until 1950s. And he was actually the third generation of the American surgeons who lived and who were born in Gaziantep. His father's and mother's graves are still in Gaziantep. Actually, I interviewed his son, Barclay Shepard. He's the fourth generation, and he's the surgeon also. I think it was 3 years ago. He was around 100 years old, and he is very sharp still. I said, "Mashallah" to him. He knows also he speaks Turkish. And actually, he says that I feel myself as a half Antepli from Antep, because his mother was pregnant when they were returning to the United States, and then he was born in the U.S., but he was conceived in Gaziantep, so that's why he thought so. So he came back in 1960s to Gaziantep to work as the chief physician at the American hospital, which is still in operation. Dr. Shepard actually told me an interesting thing. Maybe you know this name, Elizabeth Dodge Huntington. There's still a hall, I guess, at Boğaziçi University, which was named after her. Actually, why Turkey chose the United States to legitimize their fight against European powers was that also there were very influential figures and their children working and living in Turkey at that time. For example, Elizabeth Huntington Dodge Huntington was one of the influential figures at Robert College, and she came to Istanbul in 1916, and then she met her husband, and they remained in there until 1930s. And after her husband contracted polio, unfortunately, they needed to return to the United States. But she was she was at the board of the Robert College at the time. And her father, who was one of the most influential figures in the United States, a top businessman, which close ties to Woodrow Wilson, actually was the president of the trustees of Robert College. So that's why she came to Robert College and oversaw the activities. So this was Cleveland Dodge. And actually he studied at Princeton University, and when his college mate was Woodrow Wilson. And he became a very wealthy businessman from New York. And he actually supported the presidential campaign of Woodrow Wilson in 1912. But he didn't ask anything in return. He asked only for one thing, not to declare war against the Ottoman Empire when the United States declared war against Germany. It was actually a pragmatic decision for Woodrow Wilson and also Cleveland Dodge to stop the United States to declare war, because actually Woodrow Wilson was trying to figure that out, and he was thinking now of declaring war against Turkey. This was all, of course, because his daughter was in Istanbul, and if the United States declared a war against the Ottoman Empire, she would be deported or maybe interned, and he wouldn't know what would happen to her. And his son was also working in Lebanon at the Syrian Protestant school. So both of his children were in the Ottoman Empire at that time when there was war. So he wanted Woodrow Wilson, especially, not to declare war against the Ottoman Empire. Also, he was overseeing the relief work of the Americans in the Ottoman Empire. So he thought that also the Turkish government would take away the American land from them, since the American land. And this was a risky situation for the American relief workers. So he was the figure behind why the United States did not declare war against the Ottoman Empire. So actually, this, of course, turned out to be a very positive move also for the Turkish-American relations during the Turkish War of Independence and later on during the establishment of the Turkish Republic. And this is an interesting newspaper article. This shows Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and the nationalist leaders driving an American car in Izmir, which used to be called Smyrna at that time. And the title is Turkish Leaders Use an American Automobile. And it continues as Kemal rides in an American car, and it was a Studebaker Big Six, one of the most popular cars in the United States at that time in 1922. And the newspaper article says that he has also European cars, but he chose an American car to show that he prefers American technology and American goods instead of the European goods. And this was one of the most influential newspaper articles during the Turkish War of Independence. It appeared at the Saturday Evening Post, written by Isaac Marcus. And actually, he was one of the top paid newspaper people at that time, and that he interviewed many leaders of his time. So one of them was Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. And the article is 10 pages long. And also it is said that this journalist never took notes. He just memorized everything. So he later on wrote the articles. So in the interview, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who was still conducting the Turkish War of Independence, he said, all my life, I have had inspiration in the lives and deeds of Washington and Lincoln. Between the original 13 states and the new Turkey is a curious kinship. Your early Americans threw off the British yoke. Turkey has thrown off the yoke of the empire with all the graft and corruption that it carried, and what was worse, the selfish meddling of other nations. America's struggle through to independence and prosperity. We are in the midst of travail, which is witnessing the birth of a nation. With American help, we will achieve our aim. So this was directly addressed to the American people, also the American government. And this was also a very clever public diplomacy move. He published Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, he was not Atatürk at that time, Mustafa Kemal Pasha addressed the American people, which was published at a Turkish newspaper called Hakimiyet-i Milliye in 1923, and still the Turkish Republic was not declared. And you can see that it was in Ottoman script. And this was the first time Mustafa Kemal Pasha was addressing directly to the American people. And interestingly, also his address was read at the American Congress meeting. It has started as in the minutes of the fourth session of the 67th meeting of the American Congress. There are the following lines. So the presenter said, before Mr. Owen Rees, a member of the public, takes my place, I call the attention of the parliament to the attention of the Turkish president, Mustafa Kemal Pasha's address to the American people. I do not want to waste the time of the parliament by reading it, but this address is something that should be seen by all members of public and the parliament, because although the person who said this is Turkish, he is saying it in the language of American people, and this person is worthy of being listened to. So this was again, actually Mustafa Kemal Pasha was showing the American people that this war is legitimate and we are fighting like you did before. And please, have some sympathy for our cause and support us. So that was the core of the message. And this is again the minutes of the congressional records. And actually, it was read by Senator Owen from Oklahoma. And he was very prominent. He was one of the most prominent senators of his time. And the message ended as, keep your hearts open to the Turkish people who are fighting for freedom and independence and sincerely striving to become an element of progress and justice in the world like yourselves. It started like this. You have expelled tyranny and despotism from your country. You have obtained and established your freedom and independence after a long and sanguinary struggle, and you have built up a civilized, strong, democratic state based upon the sovereignty of people. So he was saying that this is the model we are envisioning. And it goes on like this. To be registered in history as the George Washington of his country is the characteristic ambition best picturing the personality of Mustafa Kemal Pasha, the national hero of Turkey. And he said actually himself, Mustafa Kemal Pasha said himself, the great George Washington, foremost modern pioneer of liberty, who won independence for his country by driving out the foreign despots oppressing it, is the man whose example inspires and influences me most deeply. So he said that himself, and then he said, I'm the George Washington of the Turkish Republic. Muftazade Ziya was one of the most prominent Turks also in the United States. And he became kind of like the voice of Turkish people. And Mustafa Kemal Pasha, he was coming from a very like aristocratic Turkish family. His uncle was an ambassador of Turkey. And then when he remained in the United States, he published various articles about the Turkish cause and why Americans should have some sympathy for Turks, and that Americans and Turks are kind of like they like each other. They're like they have various similarities, etc. So in this article, for example, it's a very long article actually, which was published in 1922. He is saying that the European newspapers were blind again for the Turkish cause, and they never published anything coming from the Turkish government. So this was why we were left silenced for a long time, and they should hear our side also. This is unjust, he said. That's why the article is entitled as How the Turks Feel, because he thought that nobody cared about how the Turks feel. That's how we felt, actually. So you should hear our side and our story. So he wrote this long article about explaining the Turkish cause, why we should get rid of the European powers and oppression, and Turkey is for Turks, etc. So it was kind of like, again, there were various resemblances between the United States and the new Turkish Republic. He also published various articles at the US newspapers. For example, one of them was entitled, I find it kind of like funny, The Speakable Turk. There is this unspeakable Turk image. So he said Turks are speakable. And he also published another article entitled Speaking of the Turks, and it said, writer insists terrible Turks aren't so terrible.
Just a little.
So he was doing this kind of like PR for Mustafa Kemal Pasha and for the nationalist government. And he also organized some addresses to the American people. He also even married an American girl, and she was interviewed in 1923, and the article was entitled "Married to a Turk and Proud of It." And actually, she came to Istanbul, and during the early years of the Turkish Republic, one cause was resembling the Turkish struggle to the American struggle, and the other one was the women's rights. So this was seen also an important cause for the new Turkish Republic, because they wanted to show that this country is progressed, and then we are ready to give women's rights, etc. And actually, they were also trying to trying to stop the image of the harems. This kind of Orientalist thought. And for example, this Helen Cullen of New Orleans, who married to Muftizadeh Ziya. She said that I went to Istanbul and it was under occupation, but there is no harems, and it is not what people think of. There are no beautiful ladies and inside of harems, etc. Harem is a place in someone's household where the ladies are. So she explained to the American public that there are no harems in Turkey, and it's not what they understood. Also, there was American business interests in the early republic. That's why also the American government and the Americans supported the Turkish cause. So, for example, the Turkey shows confidence in U.S. business methods by awarding 60,000 million public contract to Americans. And there were several articles published, especially in 1923 and also during the Turkish War of Independence before, entitled as the Turkish George Washington. So he appeared, in the U.S. news as the Turkish George Washington in order to, have the sympathy of the American people to support the Turkish cause. And again, another article. There are several articles like this entitled Turkish George Washington building a capital, and then they also resembled this effort, moving the capital from Istanbul to Ankara, like moving capital from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. So they also, resembled this move. I think many of you have seen this video of President Atatürk's reception of Joseph C. Greer. It was one of the, again, very clever public diplomacy efforts of Atatürk. He was not only genius in war. I think he was genius in public diplomacy also. This shows, all these moves show this, proves this, I guess. So maybe, do you know the technology of that time? How do you record a video with sound? In 1927, Fox Movietone News actually had this technology of combining sound and video together. Before this, there was no sound in the videos. So they started, shooting this kind of like news videos with the sound and then combining them together after it was shot. So this was a movie of Fox Movietone, actually, which used this technology of combined video and sound. And Atatürk used this new technology. It was not very common to use this technology at the time. And then he thought about this. And then he thought that if I address it to the American people, with my image and with my sound, and if I use this technology, I could show that, we have the technology, and we appreciate it and we use it. So it was kind of like showing that Turkey is developed enough to use this technology. So this is the English translation of Atatürk's speech. It was in Turkish. He spoke French, actually, because, it was the language of diplomacy at that time. And he said, I would like to say a few words regarding the national origin and affection and sincerity between Turkish and American nations, feelings which I am certain are mutual. The Turkish nation is inherently democratic. If this truth has not been fully understood by civilized humanity until now, our honorable ambassador has expressed the reasons very, very well by pointing to the final periods of the Ottoman Empire. So actually, he said that there's this natural bond between Americans and Turkish people. And also, the United States never declared war against Turkey, and we never fought each other. It was kind of a smart move in order to have the back of the United States instead of any European powers. And it was also a very distant country, which had no interest in partitioning the Anatolian lands, etc. So this was also a pragmatic reason why Atatürk wanted to ally with the United States and show that, that we have this natural bond between us. And as I have mentioned, the rights of women was very important in nation branding of the early Turkish Republic. So this is kind of like showing to the world that Turkey is very well developed, and we are ready to give the enfranchisement to the Turkish woman. And Afet İnan was kind of like also the public diplomacy figure in Atatürk's efforts. So she was also a historian, and she was one of the most prominent figures in the Turkish woman enfranchisement. So I want to show you this picture also. It's at the Library of Congress archives. So also the first ambassador, maybe you are familiar with him, Ahmet Muhtar Bey, who was sent. There was this rupture of the relations between the United States and Turkey, like for 10 years. And from like 1917 to 1927, there were no ambassadors and diplomatic representation between the two countries. So Turkish Republic sent Ahmet Muhtar Bey, who was coming from a very wealthy and educated, prominent family, and he was visiting here the tomb of George Washington to show his respect for the founder of the United States. He also gave interviews to the American newspapers about how the Turkish ladies are enjoying their rights right now. And this was in 1932. And he said, like, their American sisters, Turkish women, will be enfranchised soon. They will have the political rights. And actually, they are inspired by their American sisters. And also he said, like American women who fought during World War One, the Turkish women also fought during World War One and the Turkish War of Independence, so they deserve to be enfranchised. This was another public diplomacy move by the Turkish government. Actually, the daughter of the first U.S. ambassador in Turkey, Joseph Greaves' daughter, who was Ente Greaves, she swam, for example, the Bosphorus when they came for 5 hours. So this appeared also in the newspapers of the United States and also in the Turkish newspapers. And this was also interesting, after the civil code was established in Turkey, which granted the, which actually stopped like polygamy. Okay, so Ante Grieve and her husband, they got married according to the Turkish law. So they said yes in Turkish, they said evet to each other. And actually Atatürk sent a special message to them for like honoring the new Turkish civil code. So they were also, doing the PR for the new Turkish reforms. Another very, I think this was also another brilliant public diplomacy effort, both in collaboration with the American government. Have you seen these people before? The two aviators, Boardman and Polando. They did the first non-stop flight from New York to Istanbul, the longest non-stop flight from America. So this is after they did it, after they returned to the United States. Actually, I even found the son of this photographer, and then I got permission from him to use the picture. So it was very well covered by the Turkish newspapers and by the US newspapers. For example, Cumhuriyet newspaper said bir hamlede New York'tan İstanbul'a, and it was a like huge public celebration of these two aviators. Even Joseph Greaves, the first US ambassador to Turkey, he said, this is a miracle that Atatürk wanted to see our two boys, because many like leaders of the nations, they wait for like months in order to be received by Mustafa Kemal Pasha, but our two young boys were honored by being received by Atatürk himself. So this in Yalova, actually Mustafa Kemal Pasha was at that time in his Yalova mansion. And in some like memoirs, it is said that he was very excited. He didn't even sleep, when he was waiting for the flight to come to Istanbul. So he was very excited to see these two American aviators. And then he gave also the medal of the Turkish Aviation Society. He awarded them. Maybe you can see. This is the medal. So It's more clear in here. The Turkish Aviation Society's medal. So also this move was covered by the U.S. newspapers. Like Turkish president honors Americans born in Poland are received by Mustafa Kemal. And his speech was very, like, I think, very influential. He said it was his address to these two American aviators. While linking up continents to bring nations together, heroes like you transform nations into members of a family who take an interest in each other's joys and sorrows. I do not doubt that by directly connecting the world, this civilization of which we greatly admire with Turkey, which is at the junction of the new and old continents, you have brought closer the hearts of Americans and Turks. This is very, I think, like, impactful speech address to the American aviators. And he ended it as, indeed, you have traced a wonderful path in the skies, and your flights will constitute an encouragement to Turkish aviation. And one of the speakers at the reception of the two American aviators was Nakiye Ergün, and she was the head of the Turkish Aviation Society in Istanbul, and she became one of the first member of the parliament, woman member of the parliament in Ankara. So you see, during the early nation branding of the Turkish Republic, also Atatürk and the nationalists used the image of women and how the Turkish women were actually progressed, and they enjoyed the new rights, etc. And we have this prominent female figures in Turkey in order to prove that we are very civilized people. So that's the end of my presentation. I also prepared the video, but I think many of you have seen the video of Atatürk and Joseph Grew at the Atatürk Forest Farm. What do you think? It's like a 1-minute video.
I think you should find it.
Sure, I don't know if everybody has seen it.
Okay, let's see it then.
You tell us
Can
what
we-
you think of the American woman.
Christians.
Neredesin? Ersun'da ama şeyde yok, burada da Ersun. Gözükmüyor mu? Ha, okey.
Share etmediğim
Hı hı.
gözükmüyor.
Öyle mi? O zaman nasıl
We
yapalım?
talk about it.
Yeah, I can talk
Okay,
about
why
it.
don't you
Yeah, actually, I kind of talked about it, but I wanted to show how Fox movie told me.
online, not sharing.
Ah, okay.
Restart, Sharon.
Should I do it?
No.
Okay. How can I do it? Did I stop it? Okay. Share.
Share, yes.
Okay.
Share screen.
Where's share screen? Here? Okay. Şu video aynen. Tamam.
And then maybe start it from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Adam, you tell us what you think of the American
The
woman.
sound though, can we hear it?
Sonra sanırım da.
Amerika kadınları tasvir eder.
We can share the link.
Tamam ne kadar?
I'm sure not.
Yeah, Joseph Grew asked what you think about American women, and then she says, "I really appreciate American women because they have their full political rights, and we will have the same soon," she says. So I find it kind of funny, you know, it's showing the farming materials. Because also the United States was collaborating with the Turkish Republic in terms of farming methods. So yeah, maybe I should finish my presentation now. Actually, you see, it was kind of a pragmatic thing to actually şey yapalım mı? To use the American template in order to legitimize the Turkish Republic and have the backing of the United States and the United States government, of the people of the United States and the government. So because they didn't have any any aim of partitioning the Ottoman Empire, and they never declared, we never fought. So it was kind of also the United States was the observer and the mediator during the Lausanne negotiations. So having the backing of the United States government was a pragmatic thing for the new Turkish Republic. Thank you so much.